In order to commence today's lecture, let me first invite on stage our distinguished guests, Ambassador Ashok Gokhale, IFS, retired, Brigadier Hemant Mahajan, retired, Air Marshal B.N. Gokhale, retired, Architect Rajiv Sahasrabuddhe, sir, Major General S.H. Mahajan, sir, and Shri Bharat Vankate, sir. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Maharashtra Education Society, MES Pune, and Center for Advanced Strategic Studies, CASS, I, Apurva Barve, welcome you all to today's lecture, which is hosted at MES Auditorium, Pune. Let me start by taking this opportunity to extend my best wishes to the brave men and women of Indian Army on the occasion of Army Day. I consider this an honor to be able to do so in the presence of many distinguished members of this fraternity. Ladies and gentlemen, today's lecture marks the beginning of 5 lecture series to be conducted to commemorate the Golden Jubilee year of Vijay Diwas. As we all know, Vijay Diwas was the historic day of India's decisive victory over Pakistan for liberation of Bangladesh in the year 1971. This lecture is also to commemorate 160th year celebration of MES, which was supposed to continue in 2020 but could not happen because of COVID-19 pandemic. Joining us today for this event, we have on stage Ambassador Ashok Gokhale, IFS, retired. Gokhale sir joined To introduce him in a nutshell, Gokhale sir joined IFS in 1955. From then till his retirement, he has served in various countries like Vienna, Bonn, Bhutan, Thailand, Tehran, and many more. From 1987 to 1988, he was Secretary, Ministry of External Affairs. He has penned down his diplomatic experiences of his vast and illustrious career in his book titled Inside 3 Monarchies and 6 Republics, Memoirs of an Indian Diplomat. This book was published in 2007. It is our privilege to have him to preside over today's lecture. I request Air Marshal B.N. Gokhale sir to kindly felicitate Shri Ashok Gokhale sir. Joining Shri Gokhale on stage, we have our next guest, Brigadier Hemant Mahajan, YSM. Brigadier Mahajan holds a MPhil degree in Defence Studies. He joined IMA Dehradun in July 1973 and passed out as a commissioned officer on 15th June 1975. From then till his retirement, he has spearheaded and been actively involved in many missions across terrorist-prone areas of Jammu Kashmir, Punjab, and northeast of India. He commanded his battalion, 7 Maratha Light Infantry, in Operation Rakshak in the most difficult areas of Poonch and Rajouri. For this, his unit was awarded Unit Citation and 18 gallantry awards, which included YSM Gallantry awarded to him. He was responsible for movement of troops and their administration during Operation Parakram. In recognition of his hard work, he was rewarded with the Army Commander's Commendation Award. In addition to writing many books, he often writes for newspapers and participates in television debates. He is connected to several educational institutes in the capacity of visiting professor. Welcome, sir. I would request Shri Rajiv Sahasrabuddhe, sir, to felicitate Brigadier Mahajan, sir. Joining these distinguished guests on stage, we have Air Marshal B.N. Gokhale, PVSM, AVSM, VM, retired. Gokhale sir is not only the chairman but also an alumnus of Maharashtra Education Society. A well-known figure in social circuits, he is the director of Center for Advanced Strategic Studies, Pune, since September 2013. Welcome, sir. We also have Shri Rajiv Sahasrabuddhe sir, Chairman, Governing Body, MES. Shri Sahasrabuddhe sir is an architect by profession. He has been actively involved in social work and Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangha since early 80s. We welcome him as well. Moving ahead, we have Major General S.H. Mahajan, Seva Medal, Vishishta Seva Medal, retired. Major General Shishir Mahajan has commanded 4th Battalion, the Maratha Light Infantry in Jammu and Kashmir, 11 Mountain Brigade in Assam, and 23 Infantry Division on the Western Front. He served with United Nations as a military observer in Iran in 1989. Presently, he is Deputy Director of Center for Advanced Strategic Studies, Pune. Welcome, Mahajan sir. Last but not the least, we have Shri Bharat Vankate sir, Secretary, MES, Pune. I extend a warm welcome to these gentlemen on stage, and before proceeding ahead, I would request Major General Shishir Mahajan sir to felicitate Shri Sahasrabuddhe sir. Thank you, gentlemen. And now, without further ado, let me request Air Marshal B.N. Gokhale sir to present the opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Apurva. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's indeed a privilege for me to be here to welcome you all to commemorate the 50th year of 1971 War of Liberation in which Bangladesh was born. On 16th of December last year, Honorable Prime Minister at the National War Memorial not only paid the homage, but also called it the Swarnim Vijay Varsha, and that will continue till the 16th December of 2021. Taking that into account, we, that is Maharashtra Education Society as well as the Center for Advanced Strategic Studies, have organized a series of lectures through the year, first 5 as was mentioned by Apurva, and thereafter the actual battle of 1971 in both eastern as well as western sectors. At the outset, as Apurva mentioned, let me also extend my greetings on the Army Day. It was a very impressive parade this morning. A lot of technology was shown. And I think for the first time, we also saw swarm drones in parade. And that is something which has been talked about these days, especially in the context of Azerbaijan and Armenia war. So I think the technology is also keeping pace with the kind of progress India is making. In all this, when we talk about 1971 war as a focus, let me first mention to you that actually the war started at the partition itself. When Pakistan broke away under the theory of two nation theory based on religion, and they themselves did not look after their brothers and sisters in eastern Pakistan, now called Bangladesh, there were tremendous amount of genocide, rapes, brutalities, and I think number of you might have heard about it, but I'm very glad there are many youngsters sitting behind from NCC and other NSS who would must know this history of India and Bangladesh. Bangladesh, as you know, when got formed, it not only changed the history and geography of the Asian subcontinent, but also of the entire world. And that too, it happened within just 14 days. I think a record for the entire world to have monitored that. And let me tell you that while the three armed forces worked in unison to ensure that Dhaka fell at the earliest, the whole nation was behind armed forces. And so it is the whole nation which fought the war. And that is what is most important whenever India has faced any kind of wars or any kind of difficulties. And that is what the youngsters which are sitting in front of me would take that further in future. While we will again be focusing on 1971 in the couple of lectures from now, today we are going to start with the war of 47-48, which happened soon after the independence. The next one is going to be on 1962 war, which will be given by Major General Pitre, who has written a book also on that particular war. He will give a PowerPoint presentation like what Hemant Mahajan will be doing it today. And that particular event will be chaired by Brigadier Jathar. He's sitting here amongst the audience. He's the one who was in the Rezingla sector, which is very famous in news today. We will also be having subsequently lecture on 1965, delivered by General Shekhatkar. Ambassador Mangal Murthy, who was that time serving in the Indian High Commission in Karachi, not Rawalpindi, but Karachi was then where the High Commission was. And they had harrowing experience in spite of all the diplomatic norms that there are. He'll be also sharing his experiences, and so would Air Marshal Pingley, who got a Veer Chakra while shooting down a saber, would talk about his experiences. Subsequently, we will unfold the various other battles, the major battles that we will be taking on, both on the eastern and the western side, Army, Navy, Air Force, and of course, we'll have senior bureaucrats, IFS, diplomats, everybody who's taken part and who has knowledge about that entire theater would be also here on the stage to share their experiences. I must thank Ambassador Ashok Gokhale for gracing this particular first series of the lectures, and also Brigadier Hemant Mahajan to give us a PowerPoint presentation. On the 24th March, I would like you to all please note the calendar. We're going to have the Deputy High Commissioner of Bangladesh from Mumbai, His Excellency Mohammad Lutfur Rahman. He's going to come here, he'll be on the stage, and two officers, Colonel Sajjad and Mr. Shahabuddin Ahmed. They will be speaking by Zoom from Dhaka. Colonel Sajjad was in the Pakistan Army and he, of course, defected. He'll be telling us all the experiences. And Mr. Shahabuddin Ahmed, I just got his name today, was a pilot in the Pakistan Airlines. But after defecting to Bangladesh, in the Mukti Bahini of Air Force in particular, He flew with what is called the Kilo flight of Indian Air Force, and he was one of the first ones to have done attack on the night of the 3rd and 4th of December 1971. So there are going to be so many other lectures, including the Paradrop, the Karachi attack by the Navy, the Longewala, and many others. So look forward to your participation and your support. With these few words, let me once again wish you all the very best. For MES in particular, I have, since I am past student of MES and of course now in a different relationship, I thank Sri Sahasrabuddhe for co-hosting this, and of course General Mahajan, who's with me on part of the Center for Advanced Strategic Studies. As you know, it's a think tank located in the University of Pune since 1992. And we've been doing this to make aware the general public about various strategic issues India faces. With this brief introduction to lecture series and welcoming all of you, including the media, I look forward to your participation subsequently. Thank you. Jai Hind.
Thank you, sir. We all know that war is never instant. May it be the great war of Kurukshetra, or the world wars, or the more recent wars. History is a witness to the fact that the seeds of any war are sown in the past. And to understand this past is to understand the war. On the same lines, to throw some more light on Indo-Pak War 1947-48, I invite Brigadier Hemant Mahajan sir to the podium. Before Brigadier Hemant Mahajan sir starts his presentation, may I request the gentlemen on stage to occupy the chairs in the auditorium. I would also like to request the audience to stay patient while the auditorium staff makes some changes here on the stage.
Yeah, please do.
During this lecture, if the audience has any questions, the chits are already circulated. You can jot down your questions on the chits and our volunteers will pick it up from you so that these questions can be included in the question answer session, which will be subsequent.
Okay, can you hear me at the back, please? I think I'll remove the mask. It may improve my audibility a bit. Can you hear me at the back, please? Acha, okay. I take it you can hear me properly. I take this opportunity to thank MES and CAS for giving me an opportunity to speak on a very important subject, that is 1947-48 war, and that too on a very important day, that is 15th of January today. Today is an Army Day, and Air Marshal Gokhale just mentioned to you that today, for the first time in the Army Day parade, we had the drones which were flying past, and we sort of showed our technological power, because very recently the drones have supposed to have won the war which was fought in Europe between Azerbaijan and Armenia. Well, we are not far too behind. We are doing a reasonable job, and in recent times we have in fact fired so many missiles that we seem to be hurrying up even as far as the missiles are concerned. So I'll talk on all these issues. What I will do is, in the course of my presentation, what I will do is, first I will give you a brief sequence of what I intend talking about. 15 January, the Army Day. This is a day in which the other gallantry awards are announced and quite a few Sena medals have been given. And 26 January, which will follow in a short while, I'm sure we are going to hear some more gallantry awards, especially for those brave hearts who fought in the Battle of Galwan, in the Galwan Valley in Ladakh. 16 January is an equally important day. I thank Air Marshal Gokhale for choosing this day, because this is a day in which we are going to win the biological war which China has launched against us. The vaccines are going to start off in a short while, and we'll beat the Chinese virus. So I think we can congratulate the government on this issue for, and Marshal Gokhale also, you selected two very important days. Okay, and plus, as Marshal Gokhale mentioned, 50th year of 1971 war, the best military victory we scored after independence. We are going to hear a lot about it. Field Marshal Sam Manekshaw and all those heroes who fought in that war. And what I will do is, before I touch upon my topic as such, 47-48 war, I'll talk a bit about the history of warfare in our country in a very brief manner. The 47 war was a conventional war. 62 war, I must mention that in 62 war, Maja Sakha Mavas Bhau was martyred, Lieutenant Vishnu Atle of 17 Parafield in the Battle of Wolong. So we have some connection. While the war on which I'm going to talk about, 47 war, I was unfortunately not born at that time. Similarly, when Ambassador Gokhale joined the service, I was 2 years old, and my brother was born on that year. So we hold some connection with you also, sir. Well, but then in the army, we study all these wars quite a lot, so therefore we can talk on these wars also. 50th year, history was created, a nation was born, and Pakistan's might was made into two halves forever. We will talk a bit about it. 47 war, 62 war, 71 war. 71 war, again, there are going to be a series of lecture. Then you have the 99 war. These all were conventional wars. But what started off after 1971 war was an unconventional war, which Pakistan calls as Operation Topaz or Operation Karakoram, having two parts, K1, K2, and K3. K1 was Khalistan. General Pandit is sitting here. He was the corps commander in Jalandhar. So you may not remember, sir, I was one of the BMs in that area and have served with you when this Operation Rakshak was going on in Punjab. So that was Khalistan, terrorism, and how its back was broken. K2, that is Kashmir. It is still going on, but we have done a hell of a lot of fighting in that area, especially since I'm from the infantry. And K3, rest of India. So these were kind of things that started off after that. But now, since last about 4-5 years, we have another set of war that is going on, which some experts call as hybrid war. What is hybrid war? I'll try and show you with the help of a slide later. Just have a look at it. Before I talk about the hybrid war, just have a look at the neighborhood of ours. We have China in our neighborhood. We have Pakistan, and we are located in one of the most dangerous neighborhoods in the world. And all our borders today require guarding. We have a land border of nearly 16,000 kilometers guarded by various forces, including Indian Army. We have the sea borders, nearly 7,600 kilometers, with two set of island territories, one in the Andaman Nicobar Island, other in the Lakshadweep and Minicoy Island. So all these are huge challenges as far as we are concerned. Not my time to talk about it, but I will talk about the hybrid war. And before that, I'll introduce the area of battle as it stands right now. This is the map of Jammu and Kashmir. And what you see in green is an area which went away in 1947 to Pakistan. We had almost reached till Muzaffarabad, which is somewhere halfway in between the capital of, let's say, Pakistani occupied Jammu Kashmir. And what you see in black there is basically the line of actual control, Siachen Glacier. What you see in the pink is the LOC, which was actually came into existence after the 47 war. And what comes below is the international border, Jammu downwards. And here in between, you have the state of Jammu and Kashmir. Now we have Ladakh, which is right till here. And the other part, Jammu and Kashmir, consisting of the Kashmir Valley, as well as the area around Udhampur and Jammu, etc., bounded by Pir Panjal ranges. And then we have Kashmir Valley, which is in between. And what we have here is the Aksai Cheat, that famous sentence that not even a blade of grass grows here. Well, that is what we are fighting on today. I mean, this is the border we have with China, and of course, another set of border below. So very briefly, I showed you the map of the area which I am going to talk about. And here is the hero of Galwan battle, Colonel Mohan Babu, CO-16 Bihar. They created a history. For the first time after 1978, China lost more than 70 soldiers in the Battle of Galwan. Let me tell you that. Newspapers, unfortunately, did not report it adequately. They focused more only on the loss of Colonel Babu and those 19 brave soldiers we lost. But the fact remains that this was the bloodiest battle China ever fought after 1978. The last war they fought was in 1978 with Vietnam. and I'm sure you're going to hear this name on coming of on this 26th January. I'll go ahead, no time to talk about these things. Pangangso Lake was another area in which the Indian Army gave a shock to the Chinese. Very aggressively, very proactively, we went and occupied that area which has been shown in yellow, called as the Kailash Ridge Line, which dominates the Chinese. So more or less the advantage that Chinese had in the area of Galwan and in the area north of Pangangso Lake has been neutralized, and today we have reached a stalemate here. Nobody knows as to what will happen. But recently, again, some kind of a psychological war, the Chinese have started saying that they will carry out operations. And I told the TV channel, I tell you with a hand on my chest that China cannot fight any war till April, because the snowfall is so heavy there that no war can take place. Well, a war can take place after, let's say, April, when the snow melts. But would the Chinese have the guts to take on the Indian Army? That's the question they'll have to answer. While they will, a physical war like the one that took place in 62, or certain actions that took place at Chola when nearly 370 Chinese soldiers were killed, those actions look unlikely. But what they will do is actually the hybrid war, which I will talk about now. Hybrid war is actually a combination of all kinds of war that you think about. You think of anything, and that is what comes in hybrid war. Conventional war lasts for a number of days. For example, the 47 war was nearly 1 year, 62 war was about 4 weeks, the 65 war was about 3 weeks, the 1971 war, though it is said it was only 2 weeks, but before that, a lot of proactive actions were going on for nearly 3 to 4 months before the war started. But they were all a war bounded, fought on the border, but they were conventional wars. While hybrid war is going on 365 days a year, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And what is that happens here? I don't want to get into too much of detail, but all kinds of things happen here. All kinds of pressures are applied by China and Pakistan on us. And it's a combination of an economic war, a trade war, a psychological war, an information war, a disinformation war, a propaganda war, a diplomatic war, wolf diplomacy, cyber war, legal war. They also get help from Pakistan in terms of reviving terrorism in Kashmir Valley. Then you have Northeast insurgency, which they are again trying to revive, etc., Naxals. All this combination is actually a multi-domain war called as the hybrid war, which is what is going on and which is what will happen. So I'll not get into this. I'll come down straight away to the topic that I have at hand. But before that, I must tell you that Chinese are not 7.5 feet tall. They are 5 feet, 5.5 feet. That is the average height of a Chinese soldier. They are not super soldiers. And their biggest weakness is right on the top, a person called Xi Jinping. He is the biggest weakness. If China splits into many other sub-countries, he would be the person who would be most responsible. Today he is one of the most hated person in the world. The next, their weakness is the Chinese virus. Some people call it by a wrong name called COVID-19, or some call it even Corona also, but it's a Chinese virus. Let us be very clear about it. And that is their very big weakness. The whole world has turned against them, though not many people can talk about it. Then Tibet and Xinjiang are waiting to get separate from China. Hong Kong and Taiwan, and One Belt, One Road is another area where China is going to sink $6.5 trillion of economics is going to go down the drain. Their economy, their people are all their weak points. But forget about this. Air Marshal Gokhale asked me to speak about 47-48 war. So, sir, within 5 minutes of a brief introduction, I've reached the topic which you have given me. 47-48 war. Let's talk. One must understand that this war can broadly be divided into 3 major parts. When the war started, at that time, militarily, the leadership were of the Britishers, and that continued for some time. Then came a time in between when the first Indian set of leadership took over, and Army Day, basically the day on which General Cariappa became the first Chief of Army Staff of the Indian Army. That is what the importance of Army Day is actually all about. So then really a different kind of a warfare started. And initially, since even Pakistan Army was not ready, what really happened at that point of time was Pakistan, with the help of Pakhtunis, or with the help of Pathans, or with the help of people from Northwest Frontier Province, using irregular militia, attacked the state of Jammu and Kashmir. So it was actually a war fought by the irregulars. That is one thing we understand. Pakistani army at that point of time was not ready. though the leadership at the top level was provided by a Pakistani brigadier. This happened, they came inside. Now, as far as the state of J&K was concerned, it had not come to India at that point of time. So, Maharaja Hari Singh, who was the ruler of J&K, had about 4 brigades which were under him. So, they are the ones who fought in the phase 1 of the war against the tribals which came to invade, let's say, state of J&K. And the same tribals were again used in 1965 war when Operation Gibraltar and all those operations took place. But I must tell you something interesting, that the same tribals who attacked us in 47, attacked us in 65, today have turned against Pakistan and they want a separate state of Pakhtunistan. Initially, when the proxy war started in Jammu and Kashmir, the Pathans or the people from Pakhtunistan used to be in larger numbers as far as the foreign terrorists were concerned. Now today they're saying, why should we go and die as terrorists? Why can't the Punjabi Pakistanis go as terrorists if they want to induct foreign terrorists into the state of Jammu and Kashmir? So same Pakhtunis who fought with us in 47 today are almost on the side of India. That is one thing I must tell you here. Okay, so it was the first war that was fought between the two countries, and of course the main reason was state of Jammu and Kashmir. I don't want to get too much into the theory of twin nation theory, etc. But Pakistan said, well, we want this state because it is Muslim majority. So therefore, they decided to attack in the state of J&K. October 1947, these Pashtuns, or the tribals from Northwest Frontier Province, came inside and they advanced very fast because there was hardly any deployment which was there. Most of the army of the Maharaja was thinly spread all over, because not only they were spread in the state of J&K as we understand now, they were also spread into Gilgit, Baltistan, into Muzaffarabad, into Pakistani occupied Jammu and Kashmir. So really speaking, no worthwhile target they could sort of defend. And that is how the tribals advanced very fast, reached up to Baramulla. That is where I spent a fair amount of my time. And when they were almost on the outskirts of, say, Srinagar, anybody who knows the geography of the place would know that they would have reached Srinagar very fast, but they stopped here to plunder. And that is what gave us time to do something. And at that point of time, Maharaja signed a state of instrument signing, giving accession to India. And thereafter, the Indian army was inducted there. So this war, also called as the first Kashmir War, because all the wars that we have fought, at least the war of 47, the war of 65 and 71, Kashmir was the main cause. Kargil, well, it was not directly, but again, they wanted to revive terrorism in Kashmir. So therefore, they fought a war. But this was the first war. And this war was fought between two countries which had become independent, two countries which had a military commander of British Army, two countries where most of the important positions were held by the Britishers. Only almost 6 months later, a certain important Indian generals and Indian leadership came into this war. So till then, it was Britishers on both the sides who were fighting. So the British officers on the Indian side gave an advice to the Indian army, and the British officers on the Pakistani side gave advice to the Pakistanis, while some of the British officers fought for Pakistanis on the Pakistani side, and one British officer was martyred also. But no British officer fought other Indian officer from the Indian side. That is just for your information. And the war was inconclusive, in the sense that the problem of Kashmir that we talk about started ever since then, and Pakistani occupied Jammu and Kashmir today is with them, including the state of Gilgit and Baltistan. Okay, now I'll quickly, I think I've gone back instead of going forward. Well, those are the problems. Okay. Okay. Very briefly, I will talk about these things: Indian operations in the Kashmir Valley, Indian operations in the area of Punch, Mirpur, etc. The Indian Army operations in the area of Jhangar, that is basically in the area of Naushera, that is where Brigadier Usman, one is Mahavir Chakra, one of the Muslim officers who decided to stay put in India when the country was divided on the basis of religion. And then the Indian Spring Offensive, look at serial 6, that is, this offensive really started when the Indian military leadership took command and they decided to become offensive. Otherwise, till then, the Britishers had advised both the sides to remain on the defensive and to do nothing much. The Punch link up, and thereafter the offensive fought in Ladakh, and certain military awards, battle honors, which came in this way. This is what I will talk about. Okay. Very briefly, the political background, I've spoken about it. The Maharaja decided he wanted to be independent. When he thought he was being invaded, he decided to join India. Maharaja state forces, just about 4 brigades. Brigadier Rajendra Singh was the commander. Then the surface communication in the state of J&K was such that most of the communications came from the Pakistani side. The routes that we have these days, that is from, let's say, from Punjab into Jammu to Srinagar and all, were not very worthwhile in those kind of days. Railway lines were not worthwhile, etc. The airports, there was only one airport at Srinagar, and that too was not up to the mark. What at other places, what is called in the Air Force parlance as the advanced landing grounds, Kacha airfield, those were there. And some of the important battles that they initially, which were fought, the defensive battle is the Battle of Badgaon, Battle of Shalatang, Battle of Uri Baul, and Battle of Bhatkiram. And then I'll talk very briefly about what happened in Jammu region. Then I'll talk about what happened in the Ladakh region, the 2 operations that took place, Operation Sledge and Operation Bison. And very briefly, we will talk about certain lessons that we can learn from this war, because you really understand history, read history, try and digest it, because we analyze it from the point of view as to what we can learn from this battle, what is the thing that we can repeat, where did we make mistakes, and we do not make the same mistakes again, and what are the reasons for victory that we try and repeat it. Okay, so Mountbatten Plan, I'll not talk about it. 565, states were there. They all came into India one by one, but Maharaja was the last one to come. Then Operation Gulmarg, as it is called, was launched by Major General Akbar Khan, and all that tribals that I spoke about, they were a part of this. And Maharaja state forces, I've spoken very briefly about it. As far as the terrain of this area of operations is concerned, it is mountainous. It consists of areas which have been shown there. Basically, Gilgit and Baltistan are somewhat high altitude. The area of Pakistani occupied Jammu and Kashmir and the Kashmir Valley and the mountains around it, that is the Shamshabari range, as well as the Pir Panjal ranges, are all mountains. In between, you have the Kashmir Valley, which is called as the paradise of India. And if you remember, those people who are senior would remember that during good old days, all the beautiful Hindi movies used to be shot there. Ek Phul Do Mali, Kashmir Ki Kali, Sharmila Tagore. You know, the younger crowd behind may not even know who Sharmila Tagore. You know, last time when I made a mention, they said, "Who's the Sharmila Tagore?" So I had to tell them that she is the grandmother of Taimur. They said, "Yeah, yeah." So पहले से आप clearly क्यों नहीं बोलते हो? Why do you talk in code? You know. So, but people with white hair really look forward to those movies. You know, I suppose generations change. Kashmir Valley is actually the heartland. If you look at very broadly the population, you know, Kashmir Valley about 40 to 50 lakhs, Jammu Udhampur area about 30 to 40 lakhs, then area of Gilgit Baltistan at that point of time about 10 to 15 lakhs, and Ladakh barely 2 lakh or 3 lakh. So basically speaking, Kashmir Valley was the center of Kashmir as it stood now. Otherwise, I can get into the detail, but no need to get into too much of detail. And surface communication, I told you the basic thing to understand is that the surface communication from Indian side were weak. Surface communication were better from the side of, let's say, Pakistan. And not only that, when ultimately when I start speaking about battles that were fought in Ladakh, there are hardly any roads which were there. You know, the road that we talk of today, road which goes from Srinagar, Zojila, goes to Dras, and then Kargil, and then it goes to Leh. That road was almost non-existent. Then the other road which comes from the Himachal Pradesh side, also called as the Khardungla road, that was also non-existent. Just a foot track existed. So most of the communication was being done with the help of Air Force, air transport, which used to be used. Railway systems, no worthwhile railway systems, and airstrips, only Srinagar and one in Jammu. That was the state at that point of time. I don't want to get into this map because this map is a typically a Fauji map, and any Fauji who would see at it, will feel very nice about it. But let's only broadly see the important events that took place. 27 October, Operation Gulmarg launched. Then a mutiny took place in the forces of the Maharaja. Some of the people, especially in Muzaffarabad, which was the capital of Pakistani Jammu Kashmir, they revolted against the Maharaja and they handed over this to the invaders. That was a big setback as far as the Maharaja was concerned. Then the tribals came right up to Uri. Uri is north of Pir Panjal, and they came towards Poonch side also. and the bridge was blown up. Then power station was blown up. Maharaja fled from Srinagar, leaving Srinagar in the hands of Sheikh Abdullah and the Abdullah family, which we well know of. And 26 October is the historic day, and 27 October is also called as the Infantry Day, because that is the first time the Indian infantry landed up in the state of Jammu and Kashmir. Air Force was of great use. They landed up on a Kacha airstrip of Srinagar just in time to save Srinagar. Since I will not be talking of the battles in a very detailed manner, but what I must tell you is that the Pakistani invaders had almost reached Baramulla, and from Baramulla, Srinagar airfield is hardly any distance away. Look at the quick reaction that the Indian Army reacted with, and the transport that was provided by the Air Force, and quickly Major Somnath Sharma, the 4th Kumaon and the other battalions prepared their defenses around Srinagar to ensure that the invaders would not reach that vital objective of the Srinagar airfield. Okay. These Lashkars which came, basically there were 20 such groups, each of them consisting of about nearly 1,000 soldiers, and lot of places I have marked there. A lot of routes they came through I have marked there, but that is not important. Important is to know that they came in the state of Ladakh, they came in Ladakh, they came in the area north of Pir Panjal, they came in the area south of Pir Panjal, meaning they came all over as far as the state of Jammu and Kashmir was concerned. That is what we need to understand. And since there were no fixed defenses at that point of time, they could advance very quickly. And wherever Maharaja's army was there, they just bypassed them. And in many places, very few places, the Maharaja fought, the army fought. They did fight in the area of Ladakh, etc. I'll talk about it when I come to Ladakh. Okay, then all these places. Operation Gulmarg, important to understand that they wanted to capture important centers in the state of Jammu and Kashmir with the help of the tribals. And they thought they could do it easily because Indian army was nowhere there. But this did not succeed because of the quick reaction of the armed forces. That is what we understand. Then next, in the phase 2, the army is landed there now. Then starts the defensive battle around Srinagar, trying to protect Srinagar. And this battle has gone on for a sufficiently long time. And it is here that Major Somnath Sharma's company stopped that advance of the Pakistanis on this axis. And that is where the first Paramveer Chakra of the war was given. Major Somnath Sharma of 4 Kumaon. Okay. Then I will go down to the events before the battles. Basically, at that point of time, the tribals had a superiority, but superiority by itself is not adequate. What is more is the bravery and the human element of war was displayed in a great manner here. And that is what saved the valley. In fact, everybody fought bravely. And some of the very innovative measures were used at that point of time, which the army or the armed forces continue to use even now also. For the first time, you used tanks, 7 cavalry, which went right up to Zojila. And frankly speaking, Zojila is not a place where tanks can do any maneuver. I mean, some of my friends in the army would look for a maneuver area of deserts, etc. There is no desert there. There is no place where they can go. But tanks appearing at the height of 12,000 feet suddenly gave a shock to the invaders, and they got scared. So the psychological shock was more important than their physical ability to fight a war in Zojila, because Zojila you can hardly move around anywhere. I mean, you can act more like a pillbox. That is what they actually did. But tanks being there on where nobody expected it is what shocked those people. And 7 cav stopped them at that particular place. The Battle of Shalatang, in which troops 1 Sikh, 1 Kumaon, etc. fought. Again, the battle was fought very well. They lost a lot of people, and a lot of gallantry awards were sort of won in this area. And this is suddenly the invaders realized that now they are not fighting the Maharaja's army, but they are fighting the Indian army. So suddenly their morale started dropping down. And then they decided, let's wait for the Pakistani army to come. And Pakistani army, of course, they did come to some extent, but they took a fairly long time to come here. So success was achieved in these areas. Thereafter, Uri was defended very well. The battle around Uri, I will just skip. Punch, that is where I commanded a battalion and a brigade in this area. Again, was a place of lot of action. Punch garrison had revolted. They wanted to hand over Punch because Punch was nearer to a place called Mirpur, and they thought that if Mirpur goes to Pakistan, which is with Pakistan today, even Punch going there is equally important because that was an important communication center and a place of commercial activity in that area. But again, Punch, lot of brave actions took place. I'll not get into the details of battle called as the battle names, etc. are given there. I'll skip this particular portion. I'll very quickly come down to the battle which has been fought in Jammu. Now, Jammu also, they decided to approach on this road, Punch, Rajouri, Aknur, etc. Then there was a area of Naushera, etc. that you can see. And it is here that under Brigadier Usman, a battle was fought. Actually, Brigadier Usman was a para-brigade commander. Para-brigade, as people would understand, that is airdropped, for operations. But this was not a para-drop. This was he was a normal brigade commander who fought a battle. And Brigadier Usman is also called as the savior of Naushera. He fought a battle at Jhangad, etc. A lot of details are available about the battle, but I will not bother you with too many tactical details or too many details in terms of manpower strength, etc. But what is important for you to understand is this area, Brigadier Usman and his men fought very, very bravely and saved Naushera, Jhangad and all that area south of, let's say, Rajouri from falling into the enemy hands. And you look at the casualties which is given in the line below, and you see a lot of casualties took place here in this area. Graphically, I could have explained you this area, but I'll not do that. I'll go ahead. I'll come down quickly to the Battle of Ladakh. Ladakh interests people because the standoff which started off with China on 5th of May is still going on, and I talked briefly about it. And I would give a heading here, the men who saved Ladakh. Unfortunately, the Battle of Ladakh has not been well documented. I mean, I collected a lot of material on it at a personal level when I spoke to some people who were there, and some very interesting information came out of that. Now, since I wrote an article on this issue for Marathi newspaper, so therefore, next 3-4 slides, you will find them in Marathi. So pardon me for those people who can't read Marathi. But basically, Ladakh में there's a very important saying. They say की इतनी जमीन एवढी नापीक आहे, खिंडी एवढा उंचावरती आहे की केवळ उत्तम मित्र किंवा भयंकर शत्रूच फक्त इथे येऊ शकतात. Okay, nobody else wants to go to Ladakh. If he comes to Ladakh, either he's a good friend or he's a big enemy, take your choose on that. And the first hero of this battle was Lieutenant Colonel Sherajang Thapa. Sherajang Thapa was basically at Muzaffarabad, and that is where, this some kind of a rebellion took place. And Sherajang Thapa fought there for nearly 6 months. He did not get any help from outside. With his company of about 100 plus, he fought for 6 months. The importance was, since Muzaffarabad was not captured, the Pakistanis could not move ahead towards the other areas. So Sherajang Thapa afterwards was awarded a gallantry award. And the next part is, the next set of heroes is Major Prithvi Chand and Captain Kushal Chand Dogra. Now, they were told to go and defend Leh, no road there. So they crossed this road, crossed this place on foot. They walked for nearly 14 days, landed up there in Ladakh, and defended the Ladakh ALG, Advanced Landing Ground, as we understand now. They were these two heroes. Then the third hero is Colonel Rinchen. At that time, he got a Mahavir Chakra in that battle, but he also fought in the battle of in 71 also, where in Chorbatla he was involved in a very fierce battle in which he got a second Mahavir Chakra, and he is therefore his Mahavir Chakra bar. Okay, then it is at the same time that with the infiltrating column, they sent an engineer who was given the task of building some kind of an advanced landing ground where where an Air Force planes could land, and they did this with a fair amount of effort, and they built an ALG which was about 2,300 meters long. Okay. Now here, the emergency started. Suddenly, Pakistani army came into being, and they found that the troops which were available in Leh were inadequate. General Thimaiya was the army commander there, and Air Commodore Meher Singh was the air commander who was there. So General Thimaiya went to Air Commodore Meher Singh and said that we must now lift troops in Air Force planes. They had Dakotas as transport planes at that point of time, and we must reach Ladakh because our troop level there is so low that there is no question that that area being defended. Air Commodore Meher Singh said, Dakotas, there is no, it's not pressurized, they don't have pressurized cable chambers, they cannot fly at this height, they cannot land in this area, the weather there is so unpredictable. There are a lot of Air Force people who are sitting here. What kind of a problem that you face in high altitude can well be understood by them, but it is next to impossible. And when you are never flown in these areas, the weather is unpredictable. After 12 o'clock, the weather starts packing up. So it is next to impossible. So General Thimaiya told him, well, if it's impossible, then in the first plane in which the army will go, I will go with it. So that I'll face the same danger that would be faced by the Air Force pilot. So when Air Commodore Meher Singh heard, he said, okay, in that case, I'll be the one who will pilot the first aircraft. So first aircraft had the two senior-most people going in this. And anybody who understands military history, anybody who understands how battles are fought, senior-most people don't go in the first aircraft. I mean, I'll only put it at that level. There's a method how para drop takes place. There's a method how one bridge head is launched. There's a method how you secure the airport. All those theories were broken, and Thimaiya and Meher Singh landed up. Thereafter, the weather packed up for about 5-6 days. No induction could take place. But thereafter, a series of flights took off, and we could reinforce them. And thereafter, a very fierce battle was fought there. And since we had adequate troops, we could defend Leh very well. And there's a very interesting incident when Air Commodore Meher Singh and General Thimaiya landed up there. The locals came running, and that was the first time they had ever seen a aircraft landing there. So they thought it was a flying horse. They said, since it's a flying horse, it must be tired since it's flown for a long time. So they came with the grass to feed him. There are photographs available of the locals feeding the Dakota aircraft with grass. So that's how the history is created. Well, they landed there. We had sufficient troops there. Then the troops fought very well, and then we need to sort of compliment these brave people. And I must tell you here that they had no permission from their seniors. It was a risk which they took, and that is the kind of a thing which the armed forces do repeatedly. Fighting at times when the situation is not being cleared by the political leadership, and with good results. Okay, so then the next part is Colonel Parab. He was the commanding officer of the Gurkha battalion which was landed up there. Not many people in Maharashtra know that Colonel Parab was the military governor of Ladakh. And the Parab family is a fairly famous family in the army. There are two Parabs family. One offshoot goes towards the Maratha regiment, that is my regiment. Another offshoot goes towards the Gurkha regiment. And even now they are serving. But this brave action of Colonel Parab and his troops is hardly ever spoken about. And he was the military governor for a sufficiently long time. So these are the people who saved Ladakh. Air Commodore Meher Singh was awarded with Mahavir Chakra. He left Air Force in 1948, and unfortunately we lost him in an air accident. General Thimaiya was the luckiest. He rose to become the Chief of Army Staff, and if his tenure had extended a bit, maybe the 1962 would have been converted into a battle. In fact, I'm sure it would be covered by somebody who covered the 62 battle, that in 61 General Thimaiya went to the then leadership to say, sir, I will brief you about the threats to India's national security. The moment he said this, the Prime Minister exploded. He says there is no threat to India's national security. We don't require army. Police are good enough to take care of our security needs. As far as I am concerned, scrap the army. Well, the other things is a part of 62 battle, so I will not steal the thunder. Thimaiya was almost sacked. If he was there, possibly the course of 1962 war may have been changed. Okay. So General Thimaiya became the Chief of Army Staff. Lieutenant Colonel Sherezang Thapa, who saved Skardu, was also given a Mahavir Chakra. Major Harichand, Kushal Chand, Shaurya Chakra, Howard. This youngster from Ladakh, Rinchen, Mahavir Chakra twice. And the unfortunate part is all these brave soldiers, their bravery is not recorded adequately even into the official history. That is the problem. And if you ever go to Leh airfield, the moment you come out of the Leh airfield, on the right side, there's a uh, uh, very inconspicuous looking memorial called as the Heroes of Ladakh. They unfortunately are the heroes who saved Ladakh that day. Maybe I think the government should sort of honor these people and at least ensure that the war memorial, which has been built just outside, gets the status that it deserves. Otherwise, the story will just go beyond the timeline. So Operation Sledge and all that area, I will not talk about. Very briefly. I told you as to uh, how the battle was won. Okay, I'll now only quickly come down to the end. Battle of Zhuzila, tanks being used there, enemy goes back. I'll now very quickly come down to a critical analysis as to what happened, what lessons do you learn, because at the end of the day, military history is for learning lessons. So what lessons do we learn from here? Some lessons were fought, that the war was fought for a sufficiently long time. And why 1st of January? Because thereafter, Ladakh war, you could not fight the war because of snowfall. There was no question of the war continuing. If you had to fight a war, you would have to have a break and then again start off somewhere up after April. Okay. Then, as far as the state of forces of JNK are concerned, they did not fight well. But the courage shown by Brigadier Rajendra Singh, and a lot of such heroes are there, and they have been honored by locals. There are saviors of Naushera, there is a savior of Punch, there is a savior of Ladakh. That is well understood by the people who were present at that point of time. But the history is not adequately been documented. And support of tribals, which Pakistani took, has always been their style. The same style was used in 65, the same style they used when they launched Operation Topaz after 1972. But now the tide is turning back against them. The same tribals who helped Pakistan at one point of time are now turning against them. Not only tribals of Northwest Frontier Province, but also tribals from Balochistan, tribals from Sindh, the ones located on the Indo-Afghanistan border, everywhere, they all are talking of some sub-nationhood, creating very serious problems as far as Pakistan is concerned. Okay, then the inability of Rajendra Singh to take larger force to stop the increase of raiders, dedication of officers and JCOs and Jawans, uh, uh, etc., are some of the important issues. And you look at the innovative use of certain weapons like the tanks, etc. Then the troops important role played by transport aircraft, important role played by porters. The Indian casualties is given the last this thing, 1,500 were killed, injured was 3,500, and more than 1,000 was missing. And Pakistani casualties is supposed to be nearly 10,000. And ceasefire came into existence in January 49, and after this, the famous ceasefire line is there. But as far as the ceasefire line is concerned, it's hardly a ceasefire line as far as the army is concerned, because we continue to lose 350 to 400 soldiers every year on the LOC, both on the LOC in the anti-infiltration role and also the anti-terrorist role which army does. But luckily now things are becoming better. No resident terrorism in Ladakh, no resident terrorism in below south of Pir Panjal, but Srinagar Valley still 150 to 200 people, but that's the legacy that started off in 47 war. The first Paramveer Chakra of the country, Major Somnath Sharma, his brother was another Sharma. He rose to become a chief of army staff, General V.N. Sharma of the Indian Army. The second, he fought and he stopped the Pakistanis from reaching the Srinagar airfield. Some of the pictures of that war, Pakistani soldiers being killed in Titwal sector, howitzer being used, raiders being captured in various areas. I must tell you here that capture of raiders, a lot of intelligence came from the locals. And similarly, a lot of intelligence came from the locals, even in the 65 war, when in Operation Gibraltar, a lot of infiltrators came from Pakistan. So that clearly shows that the locals are still with our country. Okay. One Maharashtrian hero, Major Raghoba Rane, he got Paramveer Chakra. He was an engineer officer who did a lot of demining, removing a lot of IDs, etc. And he was in Pune till some time back, and but Pune hardly knew that we had a Paramveer Chakra, living Paramveer Chakra amongst us. He died in 94. Then the other, some other pictures of the war. Okay. And a total of 11 battle honors were given in this war, and one theatre honor was given. So that will tell you the scale of bravery that took place. And 5 Paramveer Chakras were given, and one of the most important Mahavir Chakra was, of course, Brigadier Usman. The PVCs are listed there: Major Somnath Sharma, Lance Naik Karam Singh, Second Lieutenant Raghova Rane, Naik Jadunar Singh, CHM Piru Singh. Because what we must understand is battles are fought ultimately by men. And it is always felt in the armed forces that there are 2 aspects. One is the man, and second is the weapon that he uses. So it is always felt that the man behind the weapon is more important than the weapon itself. And this has adequately been proved in the 1947-48 war. So I'll stop here. That I tried to give you a very brief overview. I did not get into purposely into the details of how much deployment was there, what kind of weapons were used, etc., because that becomes too military, and especially the younger crowd may find it a bit tiring to understand on all these issues. But what we must understand is the armed forces fought very bravely, and state of J&K came into India, though not the full state, and it continues to be in India. I'll stop here. If there are any questions, I don't know if there is any questions are going to be answered afterwards. Okay, sir. So I'll stop here. Thank you very much for your patient hearing. I go down. Khali जायचं ना. Acha, okay. I got a breaking news from Apurva. She says, you are going to come up on the top, so there's no problem. I'll continue to be here.
To resume the program further, may I request the gentlemen who had occupied the seats on the stage to return, please? Thank you, Brigadier Mahajan, sir, for that eye-opening presentation. And now, I would like to request Ambassador Ashok Gokhale, sir, for his presidential remarks. Sir, please.
Good evening. I've been told that I should not exceed 15 minutes, so I thought I better write down what I'm going to say. Let me begin by congratulating the Maharashtra Education Society, MES, on its 160th anniversary, and of course, all of us, and especially the officers of the Army who are here serving or retired on Army Day today, 15 January, a very important day. Of course, I would also like to take this opportunity of wishing everyone a very happy Makar Sankrant yesterday. Thank you for inviting me, Air Marshal and Mr. Sahasrabudhe and the other gentlemen on the dais, to inaugurate this 50th anniversary of Vijay Diwas celebrations, celebrating the victory in Bangladesh, for the creation of Bangladesh in 1971. It is really a milestone in the history of independent India and a very memorable achievement of our armed forces. I would like to take this opportunity of saluting our armed forces and especially the Army on Army Day for their patriotism, their loyalty, their valor, and their superb professionalism at all times and on all occasions. Air Marshal Gokhale asked me to say something about the situation around the partition of India in 47 and the situation in the world around 1971 when we fought the war and helped in the creation of a new state, the state of Bangladesh. Brigadier Mahajan has already given us a very fine account, very comprehensive account of the background as well as what happened during the 1947-48 war with Pakistan. And I would like to take this opportunity once again of emphasizing what he said, that we really need to record properly in the history books the valor and the great performance and the bravery of our soldiers from all branches of the armed forces who gave, some of them who sacrificed their lives and who fought so bravely during that first war. Much has been said and written about the partition of India and the creation of Pakistan. I don't want to go into that history. In any case, that is something that would take me maybe more than 24 hours to talk about it. But I would like to say that research on how the events unfolded will continue to take place, and the role of the principal actors will continue to be upgraded, updated, so to speak. And that is how it should be, because the recording of history is a dynamic process, provided it is done in an impartial way without bias. So I will very briefly say that what is evident about the situation in 47, as I see it, was that the British government was in a hurry to leave. The urge to uphold imperial ambitions had gone. Britain was frankly running out of money. It was uncertain about the loyalty of the armed forces, and the growing strength of the struggle for freedom looked very formidable to them. The greatest damage to the future of undivided India was done by Mr. Winston Churchill, who harbored a visceral dislike for India and Indians. If you read some of the statements he made during the war, it would amaze you that a man who had the support of more than 1 million Indian soldiers fighting for his country and for British India at that time could say those things about Indians. Of course, he had his delusions of keeping the empire intact after 1945. But let us recall that if he had not totally ignored during the war, during the Second World War, the demands of Indians to have a greater say in running their own country, the transfer of power might have taken place in a much better prepared manner without the terrible loss of lives that occurred. Churchill's attitude to India and Indians was best exemplified by his decision to withhold food grain shipments to India, which led to the Great Famine, particularly in Bengal, and the loss of lakhs of lives. A sin for which I think really no one can forgive the Prime Minister of Britain at that time, Winston Churchill. Of course, an important factor in the calculations of the British government, so Labour government at that time, came to power in 1945 after the general elections. Until then, of course, during the war, it was a conservative government backed by the other parties. The looming threat of the spread of communism and of Soviet Russian influence and power in South Asia and the Middle East, as seen by them, and the consequent need on their part of retaining a pliable entity in South Asia, which they could use later to restrict the spread of Soviet influence, was had an important role in the attitude of the British government, because they believed that an independent India would not be so cooperative with them in that task. Let us not forget that until the mid 1950s, I would term the US decision to oppose the offensive launched by Britain, France, and Israel to take control of the Suez Canal in the mid 1950s as the turning point when the Americans stopped or rather reduced their dependence on British advice in dealing with situations around the world. But until then, the Americans were in the habit of being guided by Britain because they felt that Britain had a better understanding and knowledge of affairs in various parts of the world, particularly in South Asia, not without justification, in South Asia and in the Middle East. A large number of sons and daughters of India contributed to the cause of freedom, and many sacrificed their lives for that cause. Notwithstanding the things that are said from time to time about questioning his unique contribution, Gandhiji's role in winning freedom stands apart, outstanding and unparalleled. I would like to recall Jinnah's speech in August 1947 as Governor General of Pakistan, when he said, and I quote, "You are free to go to your temples, to your mosques, or any other place of worship in the state of Pakistan. You may belong to any religion or caste or creed. That has nothing to do with the business of the state." Was he being sincere or was it dissimulation? One would feel that it was the latter, because it is well known that without his consent, the raiders, the militia, the tribal militia, the Pakhtuns, would not have gone into Kashmir in October or even prior to October 1947. It's a moot question. One is not sure how sincere he was, but the question arises, one wonders, whether the political situation and the policies of Pakistan might have taken a somewhat different course if Jinnah had lived beyond September 1948 when he passed away. The fact is now that the Pakistan Army over the years has firmly established itself as the foremost power in that state. It has a vested interest in politics, in business, in foreign policy, almost in every aspect of life in Pakistan. With affluence and power have come inertia and sapping of the will to sacrifice or think of the welfare of the country, of their country or their people. The army's defeat, the Pak Army's defeat in 1971 has led to a strong craving in Pakistan, in the Pakistan Army, for revenge, which has been a major motivator of its actions against India. As long as the Pak Army takes decisions on Pakistan's India policy, I don't see, frankly, much progress in improving bilateral relations. There is adequate evidence to show that there were people in the British government, Labour government, at the time when these raiders came in, and we were advised largely by Admiral Mountbatten, the Governor General, to appeal to the United Nations. There were people like Noel Baker, the Minister for Commonwealth Relations, and therefore the main person in the British Labour government, in the government of Attlee, who was responsible for the views, the attitude of the British government to the discussions on Jammu and Kashmir at the United Nations, that these people gave a significant tilt in favor of Pakistan to the policies of the British government, particularly in regard to how the matter was handled in the United Nations Security Council. And as Brigadier Mahajan mentioned, at that time, there were a very large number of British Army officers, particularly in Pakistan, in high positions, starting with the Commander-in-Chief of the Pakistan Army, and there were not so many, but still the Commander-in-Chief of the Indian Army was also a British Army officer. If I am not mistaken, it was General Lockhart, Rob Lockhart. And there was definitely a bias among all these people in perhaps not a bias which one could say was directly in favor of Pakistan, but certainly a bias in ensuring that British interests were preserved. And British interest was not in favor of conflict between the two dominions, the Dominion of India and the Dominion of Pakistan. So all these officers conspired to ensure that it did not lead to a war between India and Pakistan, because at a certain stage, if one reads the history of that period, you find that not just Sardar Patel, the Home Minister, but even Pandit Nehru, the Prime Minister, was very much on the verge of asking the Indian Army to go into Pakistan and clear the bases from which, inside Pakistan, from where these the militia, the tribal militia, was coming and getting all its support to cause havoc inside Jammu and Kashmir. I would like to just briefly mention the international situation for the benefit of our younger friends here, because for them 1947-48 was well before, or maybe even for many of the members of the distinguished audience, was well before they were born. I was, at the time of independence, I was on the verge of turning 17, so I had some idea, although, you know, as a boy of 17, one does not really take very much interest in politics or even in international affairs. But I was very much in Delhi when all these stirring things were happening. The international situation in 47-48 was still affected by the euphoria of the victory over Germany and Japan in working out the enormous task of rehabilitation and reconstruction of Europe and of other parts of the world affected by the Second World War, the task of mobilizing international cooperation at the United Nations and in other international forums. As I mentioned earlier, America still looked to the UK for information and help in dealing with parts of the world with which it was not so familiar. Churchill had already made his famous speech at Fulton, Missouri, if you recall, calling about the Iron Curtain coming down in Europe. This had a dampening effect on the atmosphere for understanding and cooperation among countries in Europe and elsewhere, especially with the Soviet Union and its supporters. There is little doubt that the West was already becoming very suspicious of Soviet intentions and was trying hard to contain it. Just as the Soviet Union was believed that the West, and especially the UK, was out to undermine its very existence. China was yet to emerge as a communist nation. And the two resurgent and very fast growing economies, the two defeated enemies, Germany and Japan, were still in the process of recovering from the staggering defeats of 1945. Now I would like to move, I don't want to go too far because I have this time constraint. So I would like to very briefly, maybe I should say jump the gun by talking of the international situation in 1970-71, just before the Bangladesh War, because it is really the Bangladesh War which we are talking about, the golden jubilee of the creation of Bangladesh. The world was poised for major changes in 1970-71. America was coming to realize that the war in Vietnam was unwinnable. In fact, there was a military report, very high level military report that had been prepared for the American president, which made this very clear that you cannot win this war in Vietnam. That was kept a very closely guarded secret. Nixon, advised by his what one would call gray eminence, Henry Kissinger, National Security Advisor, was moving tentatively towards a rapprochement and a complete about turn on China. Kissinger has explained this in his memoirs, which I read some years ago, because he says in those memoirs that he saw the rapidly widening rift between the two communist brothers, so to speak, Soviet Union and China. And he wanted to strike and take advantage of that rapidly widening rift to build bilateral relations between the United States and China on the one hand, and the United States and the Soviet Union on the other hand, in such a way that both these bilateral relations would be stronger than the bilateral relations that China and the Soviet Union had. That was the motivating force of the 1971 decision to begin a rapprochement with China. Domestic unrest in the United States on the Vietnam War was brewing. Nixon had pulled himself out of the gold standard, that is, he delinked the dollar from gold. The OPEC countries were becoming more aware of their growing power because some more Arab countries had joined, Arab oil producing countries had joined OPEC in 1970. Talks between the United States and the Soviet Union on SALT I. SALT, as you know, stands for the Strategic Arms Limitation Talks. And SALT I concerned itself mainly with anti-ballistic missile treaty. And this treaty came, in fact, into being in 1972. So this was on the verge of, the talks were on the verge of fruition. Likewise, a settlement between the four victorious powers of the Second World War, USA, Soviet Union, Britain, and France, on Berlin was in the offing. That also came about in late 1971. And as you all know, or perhaps you may not know about it, but these were followed shortly. The settlement in Berlin was followed shortly by the ratification by all sides of the treaties between the Federal Republic of Germany and the Soviet Union, and the Federal Republic of Germany and Poland. These treaties had been signed earlier, but they had not been ratified. They were ratified in 1972-73. This was, as you know, the period of, to use the French word, détente, which means relaxation of tensions. Relaxation of tensions during the period of the Cold War. This was the period when détente was at its height. Mao was still in power in China, but internal rifts and the removal of powerful underlings were coming to the forefront. Britain, under the Conservative Party led by Prime Minister Edward Heath, was on the verge of joining the European Union. Talks were going on with the French President Pompidou. When I was in Paris at that time as Deputy Chief of the Indian Embassy under Ambassador Dwarkanath Chatterjee, whom some of the retired army officers might well know because he was a retired officer of the British Indian Army who later, of course, became a part of the Indian Army. Later he joined the Indian Foreign Service and he was my ambassador in Paris. Fine, very fine man. At home in India, as we all know, Mrs. Gandhi had just come to power after prevailing decisively over the old guard and was already facing a massive problem in the form of the refugees streaming from East Pakistan from March 97 onwards at the rate of almost 60,000 persons per day or even more, occasionally 100,000, 1 lakh. As I mentioned, I was serving in our embassy in Paris from 1968 to 1971 as the ambassador's deputy. My first awareness of the real involvement, rather, in the situation in East Pakistan came under very curious circumstances. The chargé d'affaires, that is the man who holds charge of the embassy in the absence of the ambassador. The ambassador of Pakistan at that time was a man called Dehlavi, who incidentally had served in the Indian political service in the states, in the Deccan, so-called Deccan states. So he had been one of the assistants to the British resident, I think in Satara or Sangli or somewhere like that, and spoke a smattering of Marathi. So whenever I used to meet him, he used to greet me in Marathi. Mr. Chaudhary, who was the chargé d'affaires, CDA, telephones Ambassador Chatterjee in the middle of the night at the end of March 1971 to say, please help the Bengalis of East Pakistan because they are being massacred by the Pakistan army, which has gone berserk, which has gone mad. Please ask the government of India to come to our rescue. If India comes to our rescue, and if even 1 or 2 other countries follow the Indian lead, we Bengalis in the Pakistan Diplomatic Service will rise up. We will take control of our embassies. Shortly after this conversation, which of course Ambassador Chatterjee immediately briefed me, a man calling himself Mrinal Kanti, which was a pseudonym, of course, telephones me in the middle of the night and says, I want to come and see you. This is a follow-up of my boss's conversation with your boss. So we arranged to meet. You know, this was very soon after the External Intelligence Service of India was formed. That was formed in 1968 by a police officer of the Indian police called Kao, R.N. Kao. I had a lot to do with Mr. Kao when I was ambassador to Bhutan later in the 5 or 6 years later. So there was no external intelligence man in Paris. So this task fell to me. We arranged for a clandestine meeting at a cafe on the Champs-Élysées. That's the main street of Paris. A day later. And he turned out to be a key official of the Pakistan embassy, who in the course of the next 3 months passed on a lot of valuable information to me and through me to Mr. Kao and his people back in Delhi on Pakistan's international policy, on its relations with France and other countries in Europe, and especially on the supply of arms to Pakistan. Because by that time, France had become the main supplier of arms to Pakistan. So we got a lot of very, very important and useful information from this gentleman as a result of this contact. I had several clandestine meetings, and this was a kind of cloak and dagger stuff, which normally you don't expect a diplomat to undertake, but I had to do it. It was exciting, but rather unusual. This went on for about 3 months, and then the ambassador, I think, got wise to what was happening. And we had to spirit this gentleman and a Bengali colleague of his, who was also of the same frame of mind. We had to spirit them out of Paris and into a safe house a little outside the capital, and from there to Britain, and from there they came to India and went after Bangladesh was formed. They went back to their country. After this incident, March, we got fully involved in Bangladesh affairs in our embassy in Paris, and we used our efforts to try and persuade the French government to stop the supply of arms to Pakistan on humanitarian grounds, because our emphasis throughout was the humanitarian problem of a very, very large number of people who were being pushed out of East Pakistan by the brutalities of the Pakistan army from March onwards. We lobbied with the French government. We lobbied with the World Bank, which used to have its meetings in Paris of the Aid Pakistan Consortium. And I like to think that as a result of that lobbying with the World Bank, they suspended the aid to Pakistan for a while until later the situation cleared up. We also, I recall, teased the Arab ambassadors in Pakistan, in Paris, sorry, telling them that, for your information, Israel has been aiding the people of Bangladesh, providing aid to the refugees. What are you people doing? Tell your countries to help this the Bangladesh, which is going to become independent and which will become the second largest Muslim country in the world. Tell your people to help. It's a humanitarian issue, not a political issue. They were embarrassed, but they did not want to do anything about it. Mrs. Gandhi persuaded Lok Nayak Jayaprakash Narayan. At that time, they were on good terms, and he was persuaded to visit Europe. He came to France. By the way, he knew me through my father. That's another story. But he spent 2 days, he and his wife, accompanied by Shishir Gupta, a famous journalist, who we sent later as ambassador to Portugal. And the first night when he was there, we invited Jayaprakash ji and his wife to dinner at our home. My wife is sitting here, she will tell you. And as soon as he walked into the room, he said to me, "Oh, I know that you are a Bihari. You were born in Ranchi." I was absolutely taken aback. He knew my father very well, so they were on good. We arranged meetings for him with various French personalities. I won't go into the people he talked to, but he also met Lipkovsky, who was the Minister of State for Foreign Affairs in the French Foreign Office. As in France, they call it the Quai d'Orsay. That's the name of the road, the street on which the Foreign Office is situated. And he made a very strong pitch for France stopping the supply of weapons and arms to Pakistan. And Lipkovsky assured him that we will give very serious consideration to this. And in fact, they did suspend the supply of arms. Then this was followed by the visit of Sardar Swaran Singh, our foreign minister, in August of that year. And he came to Paris from Moscow, where he had met Brezhnev and Foreign Minister Gromyko and all the top men of the Politburo. And Brezhnev had assured him that if the Chinese make threatening noises at you, we will make threatening noises at them. So don't worry. We've got 20 Chinese divisions locked up on the northern borders of China, along the Ussuri River. So they will bark, but they will not bite. We arranged for Sardar Swaran Singh to be interviewed on TV, Paris TV Channel 1. There were only 2 channels in French TV at that time, Channel 1 and Channel 2. Channel 1 was the international channel. We arranged for him to be interviewed by a sympathetic man, and this enabled Swaran Singh to label the event in East Pakistan as a massive genocide. This was good publicity for what was happening in East Pakistan, and because this TV program was seen not only in France but around the whole of Europe. And July of that year witnessed the bombshell in the middle of that month about the secret visit on 10th of July by Henry Kissinger to Beijing from Pakistan. This was a very closely guarded secret. Very few people knew about it, and now we could understand why Yahya Khan was so favored by President Nixon and why the United States was not taking any interest at all in what we were trying to tell them about the massive humanitarian problem that was being created in East Pakistan by the brutalities of the Pakistan army. Apart from Pakistan, which was, of course, the major, that is Yahya Khan, major facilitator for the rapprochement between United States and China, a minor role was played by Romania, Ceausescu, president of Romania, and even by France, because even France had been advocating for a long time, starting with President de Gaulle in 1964, that it was important for there to be a rapprochement between the West and the East, which of course covered the Soviet Union as well as China. The French took satisfaction in the fact that this was now happening, but they did not publicize it too much, or their role in this too much, because they did not want to offend the Soviet Union. But they saw it as a vindication of the policy which de Gaulle had started in 1964. August 6, 1971 was also as you all know, the signature of the Treaty of Friendship and Cooperation between India and the Soviet Union. And it was seen in France as a victory for the Soviet Union, diplomacy, for Soviet Union's diplomacy. It was seen as a stern warning to China by the Soviet Union not to interfere in South Asia, but also as a counsel of moderation to India about proceeding carefully. Analysts in Europe saw this treaty as the beginning of the end of the policy of non-alignment, although we maintained at that time and for some time, in fact for a long time thereafter, that it was not an alliance or a treaty of that kind or a no-war pact. One other interesting item which I should mention in regard to Bangladesh during my stay in France was the annual conference of the Inter-Parliamentary Union. This is a very powerful body which brings together all countries in the world which have parliaments. And we have always played a very important role in the affairs of the Inter-Parliamentary Union. That year it was to be held in Paris. It was led by Mr. Dhillon, G.S. Dhillon, who was Speaker of the Lok Sabha at that time, and it included very high-powered members of Parliament, including Sri Shankar Dayal Sharma, who later was, as you know, President of India. This conference took place in Paris, and an important agenda which we had moved to place on the agenda, an important item, was the situation in Bangladesh, situation in East Pakistan. When the voting took place, preliminary voting on the first day, for some strange reason, we were fairly confident that the voting would be in favor of this, placing this item on the agenda. But for some strange reason, the delegation of Nepal absented itself from the venue, and because of the rules of procedure, that was taken as not taken as an abstention, but was taken as a negative vote, and therefore this item we were not able to carry it. It was the number of votes was not enough to place this item on the agenda. So there was a social gathering at the ambassador's house shortly after that, and I overheard Sri Shankardayal Sharma telling the ambassador that, you know, these Nepalese people have really played dirty. We don't know why. They just seem to have disappeared from the hall at the wrong time. I was talking to someone else and I overheard this, so I went up to the ambassador and Mr. Sharma. I said, you know, I know the ambassador of Nepal very well, and he's a good friend of mine. By the way, he was a very, very sort of innocuous person who did not want to push himself forward, the Nepalese ambassador. So very, very few people knew him even. So I said, I know him very well, and would you like me to go and work on him? So I said, fine, do it. Go ahead. So I got into my little Morris Minor that I had, borrowed from my wife, because in Paris you can't run a big car. There's no parking. So I got into that car, dashed off to the other end of Paris, about 5 kilometers away. Fortunately, the ambassador was at home. And fortunately, the Secretary General of the Panchayat, which is the name of the parliament in Nepal, was also there. So I said to him, I said, for heaven's sake, you people have come, you know what is happening in East Pakistan. Huge humanitarian problem. You are a neighbor of Pakistan, you are a good friend of India. What are you doing? Why has your delegation absented himself? And the Secretary General of the Panchayat was taken aback. He said, I didn't know that these fellows were not there. What happened? I don't know. He said, must go and talk to the leader. So he immediately left our group and sought out the leader of the Nepalese delegation. I can't recall who he was, and must have said something to him or whatever it was. But fortunately, there was a revote, a second vote on the following day. And the ambassador promised me that they would vote yes, and they did. So this was carried, and this was a great relief to everyone in the in our delegation to the Interparliamentary Union, because the inscription of the item on the agenda was extremely useful for them during their discussions that followed in convincing parliamentarians from many of these countries that were represented there about the gravity of the problem that India was facing. So sometimes very small things lead to good results. I left, I'm not going to take more of your time because I think I've already exceeded my time, but I left Paris in September of that year. Mrs. Gandhi was to visit Paris at that time, and the ambassador had asked me to stay on until her visit was over. But unfortunately, because Brezhnev was to come, his first visit outside the Soviet Union, since he became General Secretary of the Communist Party of Russia, or of the Soviet Union, was to take place at that time. So the French government said, sorry, we can't receive Mrs. Gandhi in September. She has to come later. So I couldn't stay back because I was asked by the ministry to come immediately to take over as India's ambassador. It was not called ambassador, it was called the representative of India in Bhutan. Because the king and Mrs. Gandhi had agreed that to underline the very special relationship between India and Bhutan, we will not call our envoys ambassador, we will call them representative. So I was to go as representative of India to Bhutan, and I was looking forward to that. I reached India, and the problem of Bangladesh, of East Pakistan came to the boil. It became important and necessary for my predecessor in Bhutan to stay on. And therefore, I was told, look, you have to cool your heels in India for a while before you can go to to Bhutan. And so I did the rounds of various ministries in December after the war broke out. All of you know about how things went in December. The attack on the 4th, I think it was, on our airfields, and then the declaration of war and so on. And during the course of my rounds, I recall I called on Mr. K.B. Lal, who was at that time Secretary, Ministry of Defense, very well-known ICS officer who had been Commerce Secretary when I was serving in the Commerce Ministry. I knew him extremely well. We got on very well together. So when I asked for an appointment, he said, no, you don't come to my office. Come home with your wife. Come and have a drink with us. So I went to his home and I said, I'm at a loose end because for the next 3 months I have to hang around in India. I've been told I can't go to Bhutan. He said, oh, is that so? Well, look, I'm looking for a martial law administrator in Bangladesh. And half in jest, he says to me, why don't you come along with me to Bangladesh? I said, no, sir, I'm sorry, I don't think I can do that. I have to go to Bhutan. This is just an aside. I also called on Muhammad Yunus, very close to the Gandhi family, member of the Indian Foreign Service, a good friend of mine. And he was Special Secretary in the Foreign Trade Department of the government. He was in a buoyant mood. He was predicting a not so rosy future for Pakistan. Later, he came to Bhutan as Special Secretary in Foreign Trade Ministry. And of course, we were good friends. He came and had a meal with us. And he told me that just a few weeks earlier, he had been to Bangladesh and met Mujib. And he told me, he said, Mujib warned me, tell your people that Bhutto is a thoroughly unreliable man. And you will be making a mistake in dealing with him. Then Mujib added, and I quote, if it comes to that, I am still the elected leader of Pakistan. Because, as you will recall, Mujib had got the largest number of members in the general elections which had taken place in Pakistan in December of 1970. So quite rightly, he said, I am the elected leader of Pakistan. And then he said, and I will go to West Pakistan and ask the Indian army to follow me. I finally got to Bhutan in February of 1972. And you will know, you may remember that Bhutan was the second country after India to recognize the new state of Bangladesh. The king of Bhutan at that time was Jigme Dorji Wangchuk, who was known as the Druk Gyalpo. That's the Bhutanese name for king. He asked me about diplomatic relations and so on, and he said that I'm thinking of, with our encouragement and concurrence, he said, I'm thinking of establishing diplomatic relations with Bangladesh on the basis of concurrent accreditation. That means that the Bhutan ambassador in Delhi would be the Bhutan ambassador to Bangladesh and vice versa. Bangladesh ambassador in Delhi would be the Bangladesh ambassador to Bhutan. And he said, of course, I will not take any decision until I meet Mrs. Gandhi later this year in Delhi. Unfortunately, a very fine man, this King Jigme Dorji, he died totally unexpectedly in July of that year on a trip to East Africa in Kenya. And his son, Jigme Singhe Wangchuk, who was only 17 years old, took over in October, in July of that year. I, of course, had very close relations with the king as the only ambassador in that country at that time. India was the only country that had an ambassador. And in my first meeting with him, I recall telling him that China had blocked the entry of Bangladesh into the United Nations. So we are sponsoring a resolution in the General Assembly asking the General Assembly to request, or rather ask, the Security Council to reconsider the question. And we would like, I said to the king, I would like Bhutan to support our move. And he said, of course, Bhutan will support your sponsorship of this resolution on Bangladesh. Throughout my 2-year stay in Bhutan, the new king and his government abided scrupulously by our treaty with Bhutan, which talks about India not interfering at all in the internal affairs of Bhutan, and Bhutan agreeing to be guided by India in its external relations. Scrupulously observed by both sides. Although I must confess that the young king and even his father used to ask me for advice on almost everything under the sun, not just external relations, but that is beside the point. As I said, they scrupulously abided by this. And one instance I'll give you, because Bhutan is a landlocked country. For 3 or 4 days, I was absent from Thimphu, that's the capital of Bhutan. And during that time, the Bhutanese Foreign Office, maybe with the approval of the king or maybe without his knowledge, instructed the Bhutan mission in the United Nations to co-sponsor, under pressure from the Nepalese delegation, a resolution on landlocked countries. Now, this was a very, very sensitive subject for us because usually Nepal was in the habit, goaded by others outside other countries, I will not name them, to try and embarrass India by taking steps of this kind, initiatives of this kind at the United Nations. So they had pressurized the Bhutanese delegation to agree to co-sponsor a resolution on the landlocked countries. When I came back and I found that this had happened, I was appalled because this would have been a great setback to India-Bhutan relations. So I immediately sought an audience. An ambassador, seeing the king, the head of state or head of government, in diplomatic parlance, especially in a monarchy, it is called audience. So I sought an audience with the king. And of course, it used to be a very informal affair because the young king used to telephone me and say, hello, Mr. Gokhale, I'm Jigme. can you come and see me? So that was the kind of relationship we had. But anyway, I sought an audience. I went to see him. I explained to him the implications of this so far as India was concerned. And I said, I would very much like you to kindly reconsider your government's decision to co-sponsor this resolution. He said, give me a few minutes. He went into the other room. He talked to his foreign minister, who was also a fine man, a good friend of mine, came back. He said, I've given instructions to my government to countermand the earlier instructions. When I conveyed this to Delhi, they, they almost fell backwards because they thought this was a kind of extremely unexpected, of course, a very, very pleasant surprise for them. While in Bhutan, I must end, I'm running out of time, or I have overstepped my time anyway. While in Bhutan, I had the pleasure, and this is for the benefit of the retired and serving officers of the Indian Army who might be here, and the Air Force and so on, that I had the pleasure of getting to know many of the major actors on the Indian side in the liberation war of 1971, starting with then General, later Field Marshal Manekshaw, General Jagjit Singh Arora, who came twice to Thimphu while I was there, on one occasion with his wife at the invitation of the king, General Jacob, the man who was there at the surrender ceremony, the corps commanders of the two Indian corps that were responsible for the defense of Bhutan, the general, if I remember his name right, of the 20th Division, which was directly responsible for the defense of Bhutan. If I remember his name, some of you might know him, General Lachwan Singh Lehel. So I had a lot to do with the Indian Army, although I've never served in the army, but very, very close association with many of your many of your officers, senior officers, including the successor of Field Marshal Manekshaw as Chief of Army Staff, that is General Bevur, General Gopal Bevur. In fact, the Bevurs are family friends of the Gokhales. So I used to call him Gopal Dada. I will now end here by, I've talked too much, but I'll end here by saying that I would like to sum up by saying, first of all praise to the political leadership and to our armed forces for the achievement and the success of 1971. Secondly, firm and decisive action by the political leadership based on an adequately considered assessment of a situation and on clear instructions to the implementer. In the case in 1971, the implementer was the Armed Forces of India, are vital for success. Thirdly, in international relations as in personal ones, the ability to listen to understand the other side's motives, to clarify one's vital interests, to be willing to adjust without sacrificing one's vital interests are the best means of resolving complex, seemingly intractable problems. Fourthly and finally, unfortunately, we cannot escape geography. We have to coexist with our neighbors, even very difficult ones like Pakistan. It calls for patience, flexibility, determination, and perseverance. Fortunately, policies can and do change with time. A fine example is the US China relationship. A superpower like the US ignored China for 2 decades from 19 communist China for 2 decades from 1949 and mocked India constantly about India's advocacy of China. You know, we were one of the major and very, very spirited supporters of the move that China, mainland China, must get this China's seat in the United Nations. We fought for it very hard. No gratitude from communist China, but on principle, we fought for it. Suddenly, in 1970, 71, the United States performed a complete volte-face, an about turn. Volte-face is the French for an about turn. When it perceived the benefit to the United States of the fast widening rift between the two brothers, Soviet Union and China, and the fact that the US could take advantage of this. About 50 years later, the US China relationship appears to be changing again, a second time. The moral of this, which we all have to remember, is that perceived national interest will invariably prevail in determining the policies of every nation on earth. Thank you very much for bearing with me and for your patience. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We will now have some questions.
Oh, sorry. After the 1947-48 war, we went to the UN to settle the dispute. Can we unilaterally withdraw the request, the petition? You know, we went to the United Nations, if I recall, with a letter written by the government of India and presented to the UN Security Council by the representative of India to the UN. The letter was dated 1st January 1948, if I'm not wrong. and it invoked Article 35 of the UN Charter. Now, the UN Charter has two chapters which deal with settlement of disputes, with maintenance of the peace, with question of aggression by one country against another. Chapter 6 is about the peaceful settlement of disputes. Chapter 7 deals also with that, but with action to be taken by the Security Council if it notices that some problem has arisen, and with the problems of aggression by a country or by a state, whether it is a party to the UN or not, against another state. Article 35 falls under Chapter 6. I am not, frankly, because I did not deal while I was in the Foreign Service, either with Pakistan or with the UN desk. And therefore, I am not privy to the reason, and I have not seen anything in writing on that issue, why we chose to go to the United Nations under Article 35 and not under which was under Chapter 6, and not under Chapter 7, which we could well have invoked in, I think, under Article 51 of the Charter, which talks about aggression by one state against another, and which provides for the state against which aggression has taken place to take the requisite self-defense measures until the matter, and to, of course, to report the matter to the Security Council and to pursue those self-defense measures until the Security Council takes appropriate action on that request, on that appeal. So I do not really know why we did not go to the UN. Perhaps someone in the audience who is better informed on this might be able to throw more light on that. And I am not aware, I believe that this matter has been raised recently in the circles, and that the government of India is aware of it and maybe thinking about it, but I am not privy to what exactly the provisions are in the UN Charter for a country that has gone to the Security Council in a matter like this to be able to withdraw the appeal. If it is possible at all, I'm sure that this would be a very important step and a very necessary step that India can and should take. But the very fact that it has not happened until now may well be that it is not provided for in the provisions of the United Nations. I'm sorry, I can't give you a more definitive answer to this because I am myself not privy to the exact situation.
There are questions from three personnel here. First is how tanks reached at 12,000 plus in 47-48. Why did it not happen in 62? 62 war was fought at two places. One is Arunachal and second in Ladakh, So as far as Arunachal Pradesh is concerned, very little tank deployment can take place there, except for a counterattack or something. So tanks need not have been used in Arunachal Pradesh. But as far as Ladakh is concerned, the battles were fought at Chushul. And Chushul and Depsang plains and all that area, tanks can go, but there was no question of tanks in those areas. While in 47, tanks came to Zojila, and from Zojila to Chushul is a great journey. I mean, so therefore, tanks could have been used if and also I think equally important is we had a very aggressive GOC there, General Thimaiya, while 62, the leadership was not as aggressive. But in any case, Chushul reaching there is very difficult, quite a bit away. But presently, tanks are deployed there. I hope you know it. In the present standoff, tanks are there in Ladakh, but 62 was too far away. Sir? Yeah, please do, sir. Please do.
Tanks had come under 20 lancers. 20 lancers, 2 troops of tanks were there, and under Major General Diwan, who's now here, he was a captain. They had come. The question was, how did they come? We were disassembled somewhere, and then they were assembled again in Chushul.
Okay.
That's how it is.
Yeah, thanks a lot, sir, for the clarification. Second question is, major route was Kishan Ganga. Why was the Kishan Ganga bridge not destroyed in those days? Kishan Ganga 62 was not 40. To the best of my knowledge, Kishan Ganga is somewhere near Chaukibal, Tangdar, in that area. So unless you mean in that war itself, well, destroying bridges is a very delicate decision. When to destroy a bridge, a whole lot of appreciation goes on there. What specifically happened there, I really can't tell you about that. 47, 48, Kishan Ganga, I really can't, I can't think of anything worthwhile, really speaking. But it was a decision taken by people at that point of time, and they decided, okay, let's wait because troops must be on the other side, and for them to come this side was more important. That's why they took some time. But frankly speaking, I won't be able to comment more than this, on this, because these are military decisions taken at a point of time with certain inputs which are available with you. So buts and ifs question later, we are not, at least I'm not privy to the adequate decisions, adequate inputs. How many troops were on that side? How many were on this side? When to destroy the tank? Did we have that kind of a thing? So I'll leave it at this only. Second is, was it not possible to free whole of J&K in 47, 48? If yes, was it a blunder to go to UNO? UNO part I will skip. That has been covered adequately by the ambassador. But as far as J&K is concerned, we could have well captured J&K at that point of time, because we had a very aggressive leadership at that point of time. And the Pakistani army was not adequately deployed there, So it was very much possible to reach even Gilgit-Baltistan. Of course, that would have meant all those are high altitude area, super high altitude area. And, when the ceasefire took place in the month of January, the snowfall was there in Ladakh. So maybe if the war had continued after April, it was very much possible. And lower heights, especially towards Muzaffarabad and all, it was definitely militarily possible at that point of time, because there was no defensive line which Pakistanis had at that point of time, my personal opinion. Next is 1971 Indo-Pak war resulted in creation of Bangladesh. However, 2 issues remain unresolved. Taking back of POK, we have just spoken about it, POK or POJK, which of course includes Gilgit and Baltistan, should have been taken, and I hope it will be taken in due course. And secondly, return of Indian POWs. Why were that issue not addressed? Yeah, it's a sad part. There are about 41 Indian POWs who are still supposed to be in the custody. That is what the news says, but I'm sure it will be addressed in more detail by Air Marshal Gokhale when 17 war is covered. Thank you.
Thank you, members of audience, for asking these questions, and thank you, dignitaries, for answering them aptly. It is now time for vote of thanks. I request Shri Bharat Vankate sir to kindly come here and present it.
Thank you, Burma ma'am. It's my really a privilege to propose vote of thanks for this function. Maharashtra Education Society and CAS, Center for Advanced Strategic Studies. These both organizations came together to give insight and create awareness about the important wars that were fought by India. And specifically the CAS, they have taken a lot of efforts to invite the veterans, the warriors who actually fought on the ground, and from their own horse's mouth, we are fortunate enough to listen to hear the stories or the sequence of it. And the first event, the first function today, we are about to conclude. Air Marshal Bhushan Gokhale sir has taken immense effort along with Major General Shishir Mahajan sir and CAS and Maharashtra Education Society, along with architect Rajuji Sahasrabudhe sir and governing council members. They have given support to organize the year-long lecture series on this particular topic. To begin with, let me give big thanks to Ambassador Sri Ashok Gokhale sir. By now, specifically those are from the civil and specifically the students, we have understood that it's not only the battle which is fought on the ground, but behind the curtain, on the table, off the ground, there are a number of things, number of sequences that are taken place, and diplomats, the political people, they are taking rounds of meetings in order to give required logical support to the people or the army men who are fighting the ground on the battle. So that all the sequence for 30-40 years across the nation, including even were covered aptly by Ambassador Ashok Bhosle sir. It was a kind of bird's view, that the focus was though on India, but what's happening around the globe with respect to the India, he was kind enough to give all the glimpses and unfolding the treasure of information to all of us. So really, sir Gokhale sir, we are indebted for your time. And he stand here and almost for an hour, and thanks and salute to your memory, sir. You connected all the dots sequentially and culminated the things by saying that what were the 4 takeaways of that particular war. We are really thankful to you. Next in a row, of course, Brigadier Mahajan sir, who in nutshell, to this point, specifically gave us the sequence and what were the thought process, how exactly the troops march ahead, and what exactly were covered and taken by them, and when exactly they stopped. It was Mahajan sir who, along with the graphs, tables, and PPT, he took us to the ground and to that particular period, and what could have happened, we were able to imagine, and we were really thrilled with your information, sir. We are really thankful for that. I'm really thankful to architect Rajuji Sahasrabudhe sir for extending all the support for organizing this function in order to provide all the facilities adequately. He had taken a lot of efforts. I'm indebted to Major General Shishir Mahajan sir, the Deputy Director of CAS. He had, along with Director Bhushan Gokhale sir of CAS and President of Maharashtra Education Society, they have worked, relentlessly to invite the perfect or apt people who can share their views, and therefore I'm really thankful to not only Major General Shishir Mahajan sir and Air Marshal Bhushanji Gokhale sir, but the entire staff who have put in all their possible efforts to bring out this particular program in a best possible way. I'm also thankful to Air Marshal Ambassador Mangal Murthy sir, who is taking part on the with the help of online media, the Facebook and YouTube. Of course, he might talk sometimes in the during next lectures. So we are also thankful for Mr. Mangal Murthy sir. There are a number of veterans here on the in this particular auditorium. Number of people who have actually served in the armed forces, specifically during those period. We are really indebted to have you, all of you, on this particular August gathering. I'm thankful for all the members of the Governing Council of Maharashtra Education Society, the life members, the present and the past. I'm also thankful to dignitaries who are there in the hall and who are watching through the online mode. I'm also thankful to all the audience who have come here all the way and taken the benefit of this particular lecture. And my thanks are due to all the participants who have raised their queries and asked questions. And I'm thankful to Gokhale sir and Mahajan sir for answering their queries. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. We will now rise for the national anthem, after which the audience can go to the basement of auditorium for refreshments.